Hi there, Zainab.
Hi, nice to see you.
Darren Simpson writes vivid, unruly fiction for older children. His latest book, The Memory Thieves, was a World Book Day summer read and has been nominated for the Carnegie Medal. Darren's debut novel, Scavengers, was a Guardian Best Book of the Year and was selected for the National Summer Reading Challenge and shortlisted for the Northern Ireland Book Award.
Darren lives in Nottingham, where he works with the Literacy Trust to promote reading for pleasure. He loves using otherworldly settings and unconventional characters to explore bravery, self-discovery, and the endless quirks that make up our real lives. If you'd like to find out more, visit darrensimpsonwrites.co.uk. Hi, Darren. Welcome to Studimation. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me, Zainab.
Are you ready to answer the questions?
I think so. Let's have a go.
All right. What inspired you to become an author?
What inspired me? Actually, I came quite late to being an author. You can see in the backgrounds there, I've got an electronic drum kit. I used to play drums in bands for most of my 20s. That was always my dream, to be a drummer in a band. And what happened was I started to get a bit frustrated relying on bandmates and this kind of thing, making music. And I thought, what can I do that's creative? I can do it all by myself. So I had a go at writing, because you need so little for it. You need a keyboard or a notepad and a pen. And I tried it and I absolutely loved it. There was just basically, there's no limit. You just need that pen and paper and an idea, and you can go anywhere with it. And I just loved that freedom and that empowerment that came with the creativity, And as well as that, I found it relaxing. Every time I sat down to write, it's hard work sometimes, but I felt like I was getting a break from the world. It took me somewhere else. So yeah, I just became really addicted to writing, and I actually rely on it now. I get tense if I don't write for a while. So yeah, so it happened quite late. I I just basically tried it and I just fell in love with it.
That's an interesting story. Are your readers mostly young, or do you cater to all the age groups?
Well, officially, my readers are young. My books, I'll quickly flash them here if that's all right. So that's my first book, Scavengers. And then my second book more recently, The Memory Thieves. And then very brand new, this is Furthermore. So these books are all officially aimed at 11+-year-olds, so middle grade age. Some people say they're young adult as well. And yeah, so it's aimed at children. A lot of schools read them, that kind of thing, in class, that kind of thing. But a lot of adults read them too. I have a lot of adults get in touch with me, sending me emails, sending me messages on social media about how much they enjoy the book. So it seems I like to think my books work for all ages. When I do write them, I do try and write them so that they're aimed at sort of children, but also work at an adult level. I try not to patronize younger readers. I try and make the books complex and interesting enough to not be boring for adults or anything like that. So I try to think of my books as, they're officially children's books, but I do try to write for everyone.
That's really cool. What genres are they based on?
Genre's a bit of a tricky one for me. I sort of tend to slip and slide between them. And one of the fun things about being a writer is playing a little bit with genre. But I guess people generally describe my books as being a bit on the darker side of fiction for children. So they're a bit dark. Sometimes they're a bit sinister. They tend to explore quite serious themes sometimes. So, for example, Scavengers is a dystopian book. Quite a grubby, grimy, gritty book. Memory Thieves is more of a science fiction one, but quite creepy. And this one is more, it's not quite a fantasy book. It's based in the real world, but it's got an imaginary world involved. And it's about the interaction between imagination and reality. So I guess, yeah, it's, what genre is it? It's just something that's on the darker side, a bit more unusual, I guess. Does that make sense?
Yes, I really like fictional novels.
Oh, okay, cool.
With the advent of technology, there's less inclination towards reading, especially the traditional way of holding a book in your hand, since people prefer reading on screen. Do you think it has affected the publishing companies and authors in terms of sales or otherwise?
That's an interesting question. I think I think I remember when like kind of mobile phones started getting really big and digital books, e-readers became a big thing. I remember everyone started predicting the death of the book, didn't they? The death of the physical paper book. But in the long run, that hasn't actually happened. I think book sales now are as strong as ever. So there was a dip, I think, but right now ebook sales tend to be drifting down and book sales are going up again. And interestingly, I believe you started this channel during the pandemic, didn't you? Is that right?
Yes.
And during the pandemic, I don't know, in England at least, book sales rose massively, particularly for children's books. So a lot of people discovered reading. And I think the reason that books have stuck around so long is because that they are a break from the digital screen. Sometimes we get, I like social media, I like computer games, I like watching films, but sometimes you need a break from the digital stuff. And I think anyone who sort of finds the books that they really like, they realize that when they pick up a book and get lost in its pages, it's very different to browsing through bad news and stuff. And I think people appreciate that when they discover reading. And it's like when I write, reading is the same. It's a break from reality and it absorbs you in a deeper way. It's been proven to relax your brain. So I think this is why, even though there's so much digital choice these days, people still like picking up books. Books are still going strong because they offer something very different, a break from the digital thing, I guess, which I think is really important these days.
Absolutely. I believe books have its own importance.
Definitely. I see you've got a pile behind you there.
Yes. Why today's younger generation is not inclined towards reading? Are we to blame the technology become more of a visualization, or is there a lack of good reading material?
Well, firstly, I'd say there's definitely not a lack of good reading material. I'm probably a bit biased as an author, but right now, as far as I can see, there's just so much amazing stuff coming out. There's so much good material, so many good books coming out. People often say this is a golden age for middle grade fiction. And I really think it is. There's just so much fantastic choice. And I think that, I think one of the reasons that some younger readers, for example, don't get exposure to these books that they might really like is because these books are sort of competing with digital platforms, with social media, with streaming things, YouTube, this kind of stuff. But often it's just a case of them discovering the right books, because you can have both, can't you? There's no reason you have to choose one or the other. I like both. I like spending time on my phone, but I like also sitting down with a book. And I think sometimes people think, maybe younger readers as well, think, oh, actually, I'm not into books. I don't like books. And digital browsing and stuff is so much easier, isn't it? It feels like it's not so much work. And it's also addictive. That's a sort of dark side to it. But I think it's because these children often, they haven't picked up books because they haven't found the right books for them yet. When it comes to young people, often their parents recommend books to them. They get books taught to them in schools, and often the books that are given are sometimes a bit old or dated, and they don't connect with the readers. And I think if young readers can talk to librarians, for example, or writers, and find books that they really like, once they find those books they like, they'll get the reading bug, and they will start reading as well as doing the digital stuff and get all the benefits of reading. So I think basically there's loads of great stuff out there. And the digital options do compete a little bit, but I think it's just a case of introducing children to the books that they will really like, and then children can do both.
You're right. What qualities do you think a good author should possess?
A good author? Well, I guess I'll talk about being a children's author, sort of writing for the age group I write for. But like I said, I do that while also making sure my book is good for older readers too. I try and make sure it works for all age groups. But I think, you want to write with the target audience in mind. But I think one of the biggest risks of writing for children is not to patronize young people when you're writing for them. I think young people have much more capacity for things that are a little bit scary or heavy than adults sometimes give them credit for. So when I write for children, I try and make sure it's complex and rich and stick to their vision of what they want to make. There's trends to jump up on, trends to join in books. They will maybe try and copy the success of a different book, And I think it's more important just to do what you think is good, because then you'll do a good job of it. And I think you'll be more interesting as a result. So basically just be true to yourself and write what really interests you, and try not to follow trends and things. And I think that's the way to write something truly original, which is what children deserve when they read, I think.
That's a very good advice. Tell us about your creative process. Is it random, or do you need an inspiration to get an idea to write?
It's a bit of both, I guess. I do need some sort of inspiration trigger, but that inspiration can be quite random sometimes. I'm just thinking about examples of what inspired my previous book. So Scavengers, for example, I was at a recycling centre near where I live, and I saw some cats fighting over some food there. And I thought about the animals that live in rubbish, and then I imagined a human living in rubbish. And I started researching people who live in rubbish. And in some developing countries, there are massive landfill sites where there are communities. I felt really bad. I only started to feel better when I talked to my wife about how I felt properly, when I admitted to myself how bad I felt about it. And that kind of gave me the theme for the book. I learned from that the importance of being honest to yourself and talking to loved ones when you feel bad, being open about your feelings. It's so important, especially for young people as well, I think. And that inspired the theme for this book. I thought I want to write about that theme in an interesting sort of science fiction way. So yeah, it can be a car crash. It can be seeing some cats fighting over a sandwich at a recycling center. My inspiration is pretty random, but something needs to grab me and needs to excite me enough to pull me through the process of writing a whole book about it. So it can come from anywhere. And really, even the really boring, mundane things in life are really interesting when you think about them. So I always keep an eye out for what might inspire my next book.
Absolutely. Do you prefer ebook or you want to feel the paper in your hand? Why or why not?
I've got to admit, I'm not like one of these people who sort of wrote. Some people really romanticize a physical book, don't they? They talk about how the smell of a book is really important and the feeling of it when you sort of brush your hands through the shelves. And I do love that stuff. But at the same time, I'm just as happy reading from an e-reader without a glaring screen. You know, I'm happy to, for me, it's obviously the story that counts and how much I enjoy it as opposed to the medium I write it in. But I can't deny there is something very nice about, you know, going through a proper book. Yeah, I think you're kind of more engaged in a physical way with it, aren't you? And I think the fact that it's just not a screen maybe counts for something. I mean, I have no strong preference. For me, it's about the story I'm reading, but I definitely prefer a proper e-reader or a book to, for example, reading a book on a screen. Reading books on tablets, on laptops, it just doesn't work on the eyes and it tires your eyes. And there's always temptation there when you get little alerts on social media and stuff to distract you. So it's good to sort of have something that's not electronic, I guess, and you get more committed and get more absorbed in it, I think. So, but for me, it's mainly about the story.
That's cool. Tell us about your best moment.
My best moment as a writer?
Yes.
I mean, I'm so lucky with that I've got a lot of good moments to choose from. I mean, it's really nice when you see your book in the newspapers and, you know, when Scavengers was like one of the best books of the year for The Guardian, that kind of thing, and getting nominated for the Carnegie Medal for the Memory Thieves. These are all really great experiences. And I love it when, you know, just the fact like readers sending in art and emails and that kind of thing. It's amazing. But I do have one particular moment in writing that kind of tops a lot of that stuff in a different way. So this book, Scavengers, the first one, when I was writing that, I took a lot of inspiration from photos of communities living in Indonesia on massive dumps, on landfill sites. And there's children working on these sites, you know, because they can't go to school, they pick up rubbish with their parents. And these children really inspired me to write the book. And I remember when I do talks in schools and stuff, I do presentations. And I wanted to use some photos by this photographer in Indonesia who'd taken photos of these children working on these sites. So I had to email him to ask for permission. And I said, oh, do you mind if I use these photos in school presentations when I talk about my book? And he said, yeah, sure, go for it. So that was great. But then he also said, would you like me to give a copy of your book to the dump in Bantar Gebang that inspired these photos, that inspired your book? And I said, oh yeah, that'd be amazing. So when I told my publisher about this, they said, oh, well, give us the address and we'll send some copies of your book to the landfill site, because they're building a library there, you see. So I guess long story short is what I'm saying is the very children on the dump who inspired this book, they got sent a pile of copies of my book for their library. So for me, that was just a really, really emotional moment and a very strange thing that, you know, awards and stuff in the press is great, but these weird things where you actually have the things that inspire you, so your work feeds back into the things that inspire you. That's, for me, was a really amazing thing.
Glad to hear all that. As an author, who are your influences?
I don't really have sort of many direct, I don't have many writers that I try to imitate as such, or who particularly inspire me in terms of a style or that kind of thing.
That's good that you want to be original.
Well, I was going to say, well, if you're not being original, for me, I feel like, what's the point? You know, for me, if I'm not doing something that I think is perhaps a bit new, it's not very exciting to do. So I think originality counts a lot for the writer and the reader. What do you think?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. These were all the questions for today. Thank you for taking your precious time out. It was an honor for me to have you on Studimation. Have a great day. Bye.
Thank you, Zainab. You too. Bye.